VikesNow, we're on a Wednesday. This is week 11. Fantasy postseasons are about 3 weeks away for you guys and gals participate in that. These Vikings are 7-2. I think most fans, if they had to predict back in August, we probably would have flipped if we had to say, hey, are they gonna be 7-2 or 2-7? Most of us would be like, oh shit, 2-7 if that's the option. But no, we are here at 7-2, wondering if the quarterback is good enough, believe it or not. Josh, I haven't heard your reactions. Welcome to the show. Yet. First time talking since the Jacksonville greasy win. Tell me, during the beginning, middle, end, where you're at today, tell me about your reaction to the 12-7 win over the Jags.
Yeah, it was one of those classic games where you cannot watch the box score because if you look at the box score, you're wondering how the heck did the Vikings only score 12 points in this one between holding the ball for 42 minutes, over 400 yards of offense. The rushing offense actually looked really good on Sunday for most of the day,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just the Sam Darnold debacle that really took things apart. And honestly, like I'm still we I think it was after the two losses after the bye. I'm kind of like in that exact same spot where it's like I'm not panicking about this team. I still think it's a really good team. I think it's a playoff team for sure, and especially now that they only need to win 3 games over the last 8 weeks to really solidify that spot in the playoffs. But am I convinced that this team's gonna win a Super Bowl? No, absolutely not. I think this is a team where we're probably looking at maybe upsetting a team in the wild card round and then maybe getting bounced by one of the heavy hitters in the divisional or maybe even the NFC conference game if they make it that far. But overall, I mean, I still think that you look at this team at the beginning of the year. I think you take that any day, any year when you look at where the Vikings were at coming into the season between losing JJ McCarthy, all the stuff that they did in the offseason to really flip a bunch of the defense over the Sam Darnold situation. Like at 10-7 in a playoff win is a serious success for 2024 if that's what we're looking at. So I'm not panicked about this team. It's never been about 2024, and I think that Jacksonville game kind of solidified that. Yeah, it's really not about 2024. Anything at this point is just icing on the cake at this point. So I'm completely satisfied with what we've seen out of this team. But yeah, if you are a person that's looking at this team at 7-2 and you're like, hey, man, we really need to go all in on maybe winning the Super Bowl this year. Like, and I think that maybe that's the correct mindset, but after Jacksonville, I just don't see any situation where, especially if Sam Darnold doesn't improve his game over the final 8 weeks of the season, and he kind of just continues to be like good at sometimes, really bad at other times. I think that that's probably just not going to happen this year, but that's okay. We're looking at 2025 and beyond.
So I too think the Vikings will. I don't know if you even know if it'll be an upset depending on who they play. I think they'll win a playoff game. I think this team is deep and balanced enough. I have confidence they'll figure out their turnover giveaway situation. I don't know if you saw Paul Allen and Mike Florio had a miniature debate because during the
I didn't.
debacle, yeah, Sam Darnold was throwing his picks, and of course Mike Florio said the Vikings should probably start to look at Ryan Tannehill. This was like at 2 p.m. And Paul Allen said, no, thanks. And then Florio replied on Twitter, well, then it's just going to be a divisional round exit then. And I retweeted, like, good, give me the divisional round. Like, I
Yeah,
will take
seriously.
that. Yeah, if that is guaranteed by this tweet, I will take it because that will have meant that you, in your house money transformational year, you want a playoff game. And the future should be ripe for McCarthy. I also want to point out that the Vikings are 7-2. But this NFC wildcard chase is oddly deep. The Packers are in the last seed at 6-3. So this is probably not going to be one of the years where you can mosey on in at 8-9, maybe not even 9-8. So the Vikings at least need to find 3 wins, go 3-5 the rest of the way to feel comfortable. And then you talked about Darnold and those interceptions. Even though his ball placement wasn't crisp, he still ended up as the league's 12th best quarterback on that day alone. And that's because he moved the sticks. The Vikings offense was productive, but I don't know. It must have been like the yips or something because like it started to feel like that Raiders game where, God, if we can just eke out a win and then figure it out later. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And at this point, honestly, like I'm looking at 2025. I'm fully expecting JJ McCarthy to just come out and just ripping the ball over those first 5 weeks. Like I'd be shocked if he did anything else at this point, considering what Sam Darnold did to start this season, what
Mm-hmm.
Josh Dobbs was doing after Kirk Cousins went down. Like at this point, it's gonna take at least we're gonna have to get like 8 weeks deep into the season before I'm like, okay, is JJ McCarthy really the real deal, or is this just Kevin O'Connell pulling another rabbit out of the hat of a quarterback he can just get stuff out of for 8 weeks and then it's gonna fall apart? Because it's been a roller coaster ride since that Kirk Cousins injury. Even
Hmm.
like looking back at it, like
A year
all
now.
these quarterbacks you plug in and they're really good for 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it is, and then it just completely bottoms out. And it seems like it's gonna be another roller coaster ride going into 2025. But yeah, I completely agree. The offense was moving the sticks on Sunday, and if they can just get rid of these damn turnovers, this can be a really good football team. It's just gonna be like, can Sam Darnold get him over the hump here? And I'm just not overly convinced that past the divisional round, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, they probably don't have the juice to get to NFC Championship, and that's mainly, I think, because of our fears of Sam Darnold. I mean, he's not even remotely battle tested in that arena. Right
Yeah,
now, we're debating whether or not he'll rebound from Week 10. And
right.
think about what our anxiety and butterflies will be in January. I will say this for those that are 7-2, this team can get frisky and win it all. Like Vikings were ever going to win it, it'd probably be in some backward ass year anyway. This defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
Like if
Yeah.
you had not gonna if JJ McCarthy is the real deal, or let's just say Joe Burrow played for the Vikings or something like JJ McCarthy and Joe Burrow give me a lot of parallels when I watch them. This we wouldn't have to worry about the defense. Of course, they had a couple flubs against the Lions and the Rams, but they seem to get that out of their system. And now that the God Blake Cashman is back, everything has they're stomping on inferior quarterbacks. I can't believe we as a fan base got afraid of Joe Flacco going into a game. Thankfully, we didn't do that for Mac Jones, and then he really showed his ass in the second half. So the defense, I will say, although they had a little hiccup, I think they can win a chip, but I just don't think it'll be this year. All right, let's get into where we're slightly at halftime of the Jaguars game. We were at the half point of the Vikings season, so we're a little bit late here. But I want to know over these next 8 games, where the Vikings basically have to finish 3-5 to get in the dance. I want to hear from you 4 players who need to step up. Now you can interpret this in any way that you like. This can be like he's already playing pretty well and he needs to take it to the next notch, or it can be he needs to get his poop in a group, figure it out because things aren't going well. So let's kick off your list. We got 4 of these from you. Who's your first one?
Well, let's start. Let's just continue with the quarterback talk, and it's Sam Darnold
Mm-hmm.
because if we get more of these 3 interception performances, just he's throwing the ball all over the place. He's got the ghosts in his eyes again, like he did with the Jets. Then this Vikings team is kind of just cooked. Like at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, it's going to come down to whether or not this quarterback can really figure it out. And I have faith that he can at least be a game manager in this offense. We don't need him to be the player that he was for the first 5 weeks of the season, where the offense was just one of the most dominant units in the entire NFL before the bye week. We just need him to be 75 to 80% of that guy for this team to really be competitive in the NFC and make not only a wild card spot, compete for the NFC North,
Mm-hmm.
because the Lions are inevitably going to lose another game, I think, before the season ends. So I do think that at the end of the day, Sam Darnold, he can be that game manager type. He's proven that he can, and I think he's fully capable of it. We just need to see him bounce back from one of these bad games and really put it together. And I think he has a really good opportunity to do that against the Tennessee Titans defense.
Yeah, the way things are going, because the team is relatively balanced. I was saying it during the win streak, and I'll say it now. The Vikings basically need mid 2000s Brad Johnson right now to get to the postseason and maybe win a game. And Darnold has played a little bit worse than that on Sunday, so he needs to get back to being decent, not shitty, because those interceptions were pretty unforgivable. Speaking of the Lions, I know this is whataboutism, but I gotta ask you, why did Jared Goff throw 5 interceptions against the Texans and then nobody asked Dan Campbell if he's going to be benched? Where Darnold throws 3 and we think we have a miniature quarterback controversy. Is it that Goff had a good year last year and got to the Super Bowl once and that he gets some grace? Why was nobody cares that he threw 5 picks?
I think it's ultimately just because it's the Detroit Lions, and they're an absolute unit at this point in the season. Like I still think even with that 5 interception game, and they still managed to win, kind of solidified to me that they are the best team in the NFL right now. Like they have, outside of Jared Goff's performance on Sunday, they really have no flaws on that team
Mhm.
at this point. And I don't foresee Jared Goff doing that again for the rest of the year either. So I kind of understand it. But yeah, it's a little funny that Jared Goff can just kind of fly under the
Yeah,
radar
we all
through these.
shrugged. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
at least
Yeah.
they won, and so did the Vikings. But one
Right.
thing
Yeah.
one thing I'll point out about the Lions that makes them a bona fide contender, we already knew that they should have won the NFC Championship, but they had the largest collapse in title game history. Their defense is somehow even better by the numbers than their offense, and that was not the case when they started to come up. In 2022, the second half of the season, the defense was still shitty. Last
Mhm.
year, it was mediocre. Now it's a top five unit. So that, if you are finding reasons to be afraid of the Lions, is they're not just an offense enterprise. They're balanced, and the defense, oh my goodness, is actually better than the offense. So I completely agree that we just need Darnold to give, if he's got to throw one pick per game, I can handle that. I watched Nick Mullins games last year, but this three stuff, especially in the red zone, that's, if he does that again and then into the Bears week, we're going to start really thinking about Nick Mullins. We're just not there yet. So Darnold needs to step it up in the last 8 games if they have any hope at playoff competence. Who's the next guy?
I'm throwing Dallas Turner in here, but really you could throw any of the edge rushers behind Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard in here. I just
Mm-hmm.
think we need one of these guys to really step up and be a competent pass rusher behind those top two players, because at this point, like Dallas Turner, he finally actually surpassed Patrick Jones in snaps on Sunday, which was interesting to see. But regardless, he hasn't recorded a sack since week one after
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Jones's absolutely immaculate start to the season through the first 4 5 games. He like has 2 pressures over the last like 5 games, I think, and he hasn't recorded a tackle for loss or sack. So I think we just need one of these guys to really step up. And I hope it's Dallas Turner just for the sake of the Vikings, because if he kind of uses some momentum, gets going over the second half of the year, carries that into 2025, I think this defense is in an absolutely fantastic spot for next season. So I'm hoping it's Dallas Turner, but we just need one of these edge rushers to start putting a little bit more pressure on opposing quarterbacks for this team to really take it to the next level.
It better be Dallas Turner because
Yeah.
there's no good reason that Patrick Jones midway through this season should be out snapping Dallas Turner. And especially it makes it a little bit more if you follow the whole product of the NFL, you see Chop Robinson's tearing it up. Jared Verse is going to win D-Roy, and you start to think, like are we really going to have three studs? Just by sheer draft math, one of them is probably going to be mid, and we hope it's not Turner because it looks like Verse is the real deal. Now Verse is getting unabashed playing time. They don't have any other Grenards or Van Ginkels in front of him, and I still think Turner will be very good. But it's time to put Patrick Jones. He's not going to be back on the team, or if he is, it's going to be a really dinker deal. I actually thought they might try to trade him, but I'm right there with you with Turner. I think he's completely healed from his injury 2 months ago, and I don't have fear like, oh my goodness, when are they going to get Turner? It's just that why was Patrick Jones the guy this long?
Yeah, I kind of see where you're coming from there. I think the other thing, especially if we're comparing a Turner to Verse, I think we also have to take into account that Turner's playing time compared to Verse in
Mm-hmm.
college was very, very small compared to
Yeah.
Verse's. Like with Verse, he's what, 24, 25 at this point. He's a full product at this point. Like we
Okay.
know
I
what we're
didn't know
getting
that.
out of Yeah, no, he's a lot older than Turner, so I think that's part of the reason why the Rams felt a little bit more comfortable throwing him straight into the defense. He's a more mature player. He's got a little bit more playing time, whereas Turner, I think he only started 2 years in college
Okay.
compared to Verse, who's there for 4 or 5 years in college. So he's definitely got the edge there. So I think that's, if we're taking some comfort in Dallas Turner's not getting a ton of playing time at this point, I think that is the thing to point to.
He's got the edge there. No pun
Yeah.
intended from Josh Fry. All right. Who's number three that needs to step up in these final 8 games?
Number three, I think it's the new left tackle, Cam Robinson.
Yeah.
Sunday was so it wasn't bad. It's just some of these little things, like the three penalties that he had called against him on Sunday, and I completely get it. Like, not only is he getting thrown into this offense just days after being traded by the Jaguars, but he's also trying to replace one of the best left tackles in the entire league. So any mistake that you make at that left tackle position is going to be a little bit extra notable compared to Darisaw, who's usually there. So I think that Cam Robinson, I think he's a fine player, and I think he will get it together. It's just, man, the penalties, he allowed six pressures on Sundays. It's just it's been a far cry from what we're used to seeing with Darisaw at this point, and I think he will get it together just as he gets a little bit more comfortable in the offense. But if the Vikings are going to have any hope of Sam Darnold playing a little bit better, they need to get better protection in front of him, and Cam Robinson is the key there.
And especially probably a little sad for Cam Robinson because he went back to his old employer and then he was quite good against the Colts, or at least he held up. And then this
Mm-hmm.
game was a regression. But this is, I mean, this is kind of how it's going to go. He's not even in the same class as Christian Darrisaw. And I think because Darrisaw has been so good so immediately in his career, we have this high standard. We're kind of back to where we were from the Riley Reef days, where you're like,
Right.
hey, this guy's decent. You're going to have these flaws. And I expect Robinson, just like Darnold, to rebound. It just kind of sucked for his sake that it was against his old team. All right, I want to before or one more person needs to step up because then I want to ask you about the draft since you start peeking at this sooner than most. Who is the final Viking that must step up his game?
This is a little bit nitpicky for me. But I'm going with Ivan Pace, and it's not because of anything that he does in run defense or his pass rushing ability, because he's absolutely superb at that. We all know that, but it's the pass coverage for me, and I think that's part of the reason why the defense took a little bit of a step back without Blake Cashman in the lineup. It's Ivan Pace, just he hasn't shown a consistent ability to be a pass coverage linebacker for the Vikings this season. Since the bye week, he's been targeted 12 times and he's allowed 11 receptions for 116 yards and a touchdown. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those aren't out of this world like bad numbers if you just take them as a surface hole. Like, it's only 12 targets, but at the end of the day, if an opposing offense comes into a game and they see that Ivan Pace just cannot hold up in pass coverage, guess who they're going to be targeting over and over and over again, especially in the NFC North, where you've got a bunch of talented tight ends who really can make an impact on the game, like Tucker Kraft in Green Bay, Cole Kmet in Chicago, and obviously Sam Laporta in Detroit. Like, this is something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, and like it hasn't been great for Ivan Pace in terms of pass coverage. Everything else he does is absolutely great, but again, if this team is going to be legitimate come January, I think that Ivan Pace is going to need to be a little bit better in terms of his pass coverage for the rest of the season.
And I believe this talker because last year the Vikings ranked 32nd in opposing completion percentage allowed. And Jordan Hicks wasn't very good at pass coverage. That's why they let him walk to the Browns. Blake Cashman is very good at pass coverage. So if you look back and try to figure out, what was the problem last year with the defense when it got really, really nasty and bad in December and January? And I think it's a lot to do with Jordan Hicks and Ivan Pace. They don't really play pass coverage that well. Whereas now the defense feels more consistent, certainly better. And that's because you have Blake Cashman. He's a savant at that. I mean, that's his thing, his pass coverage as a linebacker. All right, here's what I want to ask you about the draft. If we assume that I think we're over the fears of a 2016 collapse because they're 7-2. The schedule, they should beat the Titans. The Bears are in utter disarray. Go figure. The Cardinals game is at home. Cousins revenge game after that. I think Brian Flores will be able to get to Cousins more so than Cousins can get to Brian Flores. I mean, so quietly you're starting to peer ahead and be like, oh God, they could be 10-3, 11-2 by this time. So let's assume that the Vikings win that playoff game that you and I predict. Hopefully it's against the Falcons in their building if we can't get past the Lions in the NFC North. Let's say the Vikings have about the 24th pick in the draft. What are you thinking for that pick? Since you've already been looking at the prospects, is there a player that you've circled in that territory? Is it a trade down? Is it somebody you want to fall? Give me a November 13th draft speech for the Vikings.
I think ultimately a trade down might make the most sense if the Vikings are picking in that territory, just because they have so few draft picks going
Mm-hmm.
into next spring, and they do quietly have a few holes that they're going to need to fix unless they do some crazy stuff in free agency, which is entirely possible considering what they did last year. But yeah, I think a trade down makes a lot of sense there. But if they do stick and pick, I'm looking at corner, and Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame is the guy that stands out. He's 6 foot, 190. He's a very quick guy, and just you watch him play, he definitely can hold up on the boundary. And I think that's something that the Vikings, especially when you're looking at Stephon Gilmore, or Shaq Griffin, sorry,
Hmm.
as basically the top two guys in that department. And Byron Murphy entering free agency this offseason as well, which will definitely be a big talker come March, because I think that he's been a very key piece of this Viking success on defense so far this year. Cornerback is a position that I think the Vikings need to for 2025 if they want to keep this defensive good times rolling. And Benjamin Morrison, I think, would be a really solid option there. And looking down a little bit further, if we're getting a little bit crazy and want to go safety, say Harrison Smith retires, Cam Bynum entering free agency. Kevin Winston out of Penn State is another guy who could hypothetically be available somewhere around the 20s, maybe late end of the first round, maybe early second round, considering he's a safety. Who knows exactly how high the NFL decides to pick him there. So honestly, I think it's trade down or secondary for me at this point.
So when you talk about Benjamin Morrison, last year your guy at that spot, CB, was Quinion Mitchell, and he's probably the best defensive player rookie right now. Jared Verse would say
Yep.
no, but Quinion Mitchell, pound for pound, is probably the best defensive player. So you nailed that one. Is Benjamin Morrison in that territory from what you've seen, or not quite?
I don't think he's quite a Quinion Mitchell, just
Okay.
because Quinion Mitchell was just so outstanding at Toledo and just an absolute baller throughout his entire collegiate career. So I think we'd have to temper expectations a little bit, but can he be a starting cornerback in the NFL? Absolutely, I think he can. So I think that's kind of the bar I'm setting there for Benjamin Morrison.
And this position, along with defensive tackle, but cornerback will be vital because as it stands right now, the guys that are under contract for the 2025 Vikings at cornerback are Dwight McGlothern, Caleb Evans, and Najee Thompson, we think. And that's not going to cut it. So
Not
they'll
gonna cut
they'll either
it.
have to, they'll probably resign Byron Murphy. I don't know if they'll ride again with the old vets in Gilmore, who will be what 35, probably not. There will be free agent options, and I think the Vikings will have about 50 million kind of free to spend once they resign some of the guys on the back of this board. But cornerback right now feels fine because you've got these veterans that are solid and battle tested. But quickly, especially if Byron Murphy wants to go elsewhere, you're going to have a panic button to press because you're going to have to go get a free agent like Asante Samuel or somebody. The dude from the 49ers is already off the board. He re-signed yesterday, and that was supposed to be one that everybody was going to covet. And then defensive tackle too, but we've asked for that for a decade since Kevin Williams left the team. So even though I will continue to mention it, it feels like a broken record that they don't realize in Egan that you can go get a dominant defensive tackle. They just
Yeah.
never like last year there was like 8 or 9 of them to choose from in free agency, and we're like, no, we're getting Jerry Tillery.
Yeah, and honestly, with what we've seen out of Grenard, Van Ginkel, even like Hashman and Hyven Pace, like I don't necessarily know that there's a real need at that spot of Brian Flores defense at this point, just because they have so many other guys, and like the guys that are running out at defensive tackle now, Harrison Phillips is good, but
Mm-hmm.
like Jonathan Bullard, you got Jerry Tillery, these guys that are basically just like, yeah, they're okay, but they're not exactly great, and they're still putting up decent numbers. Like this defense is still absolutely fantastic. So I think that despite that the Vikings don't have a real top name at the defensive tackle
Mm-hmm.
spot, like the need in the secondary is going to be
Yeah.
dire if things go the way that we kind of think that they are at this point.
Yeah, that will be an like I said, panic button
Yeah.
necessity, whereas the defensive tackle would kind of feel like gravy. But what pisses me off the most about ignoring this position is you could have got Calais Campbell like any
Yeah.
month of the summer, and that guy never ages. Like this is probably his last season, so it's not like he's going to come join the Vikings. But I remember like each time there'd be a new defensive tackle who'd sign elsewhere, like Eric Armstead to the Jaguars, and be like, "Oh, cross him off the list." And it got down to June and July, and it was Calais Campbell, who like he doesn't have bad years. He's 38. He's almost my age, and he's just still. I mean, if you watch that Dolphins game on prime time, he's a baller. So even doing something as elementary as signing Calais Campbell, it would have been a better fit for Calais Campbell to play for the Vikings at 7-2 for the Dolphins, who are 3-6 or whatever they
Yeah.
are. So, all right, sir, I got the Vikings winning against the Titans 27-17. What say you?
I might go a little bit higher than you. I'm gonna go Vikings 34 and Titans 20 on Sunday.
Getting a little cocky there after
Yeah,
the
getting
12-7.
cocky.
Yep. Let's see it. Your score would give, let's see, Parker Romo would get 2 field goals, and we'll see it. We'll continue to see if he's a stud. All right, my friend. We'll talk to you next Wednesday, getting ready for Bears week. We'll see if they're a little bit more afloat. You have any
That was
closing thoughts on them?
that was something this weekend from out of Chicago. Like it's how far they've fallen since the start of the season is just it's pretty remarkable, and just glad it's not the Vikings. Glad it's them and not us.
Well, I'm glad in general that it's happening to them.
Yeah.
It's so when they were 4-2 and every NFC North team was balling, I kept looking at their schedule and thinking, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be this good because they're going to start playing some real opponents. But I didn't have the
Yep.
balls to tweet that because I didn't want to be wrong or hear it from Bears fans. But I think that was right. They started playing real teams, and then they
I think
just
so too.
yeah,
Yeah.
that happens. There was a couple years ago where I think Darnold's Panthers started 3-0, like in 2021 or something.
Hmm.
And we kind of did the hey, Darnold is finally doing it. But that was only because they had played like the easiest possible schedule. I think like not long ago the Broncos started 3-0, but that was because all of these opponents. So I mean, you can't control your schedule, but I think the Bears are a product of a pretty smooth sailing to start the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That 10-0 Steelers team in
Yeah.
2020s.
Oh, yeah. That
Yeah.
notorious. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept looking at the numbers of that team. That I think that was the season where maybe it was the year after. There was in Roethlisberger's final year, just like Brady, he'd play like shit through 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter would show up, and he was old
Yeah.
Roethlisberger, just like Brady in that final year. I don't know if that was that
Yep.
one or the following year.
I think it was that one. Yeah, yeah.
All right, man. We'll talk to you in one week. Okay.
Sounds good. See you then.
Yep. Later.